All right, we'll get started. Well, welcome to the Voter Education Coalition and WOW 6 General Election Forum. I'm 6 News anchor Stephanie Bryant and your moderator for the evening. The Voter Education Coalition is a nonpartisan organization that sponsors candidate forums, meet and greets, and other events to educate citizens about candidates and their policies. You can learn more about VEC and the events by visiting their Facebook page at facebook.com/VECDGKS or the VEC website at votereducationcoalition.org. WOW 6 will be showing a replay of this forum several times over the next few weeks starting October 19th. It will also be available anytime on 6lawrence.com and on demand. We would like to thank the City of Lawrence and the staff for the use of their facility and all their help in making this event possible. All candidates were invited, but not all were able to attend. Now, the rules for the forum are very simple. I will be asking questions, and each question will have a designated response time. Candidates will answer the questions, and at the end of this period, you'll hear a bell, and that's when we'll move on to the next candidate or question. We will rotate the order of responses between each candidate. There will be no rebuttals and no questions from the candidates. Each candidate will get 60 seconds to open, and with that, we'll start things with you, Ms. Ma.
Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone who was able to attend tonight, and Channel 6 and all those involved in making this happen. My name is Ann Ma, and I am a candidate for the State Board of Education. Like many Kansans, I'm concerned about the direction the state is taking public education. You know, Kansas settlers got it. They felt so strongly about public education, they put it in our Constitution, guaranteeing every child a free public education. But it's like today, the leaders in Topeka don't get the connection between a bright future and great public schools. In fact, it's like they're doing everything they can to hurt public education. And that's why I'm running for the State Board of Education. This just has to stop. My credentials are strong, and I look forward to answering the questions that you have this evening. Thank you.
All right. Sue.
My name is Sue Mollenkamp. My decision to file as a candidate for the State Board of Education grew out of my work as committee assistant with the House Education Committee. For 4 years, I've watched as lines were drawn with one side focusing on the education system and funding, while the other side focused on ways to meet the needs of individual students. This campaign has continued the discussion along similar lines. My focus is on students because I believe that they are the essential part of our education system. Without them, there'd be no need for the system, and there'd be no need for the funding. While all views need respectful consideration, if we place our focus anywhere else, we're missing the point. When students are our focal point, the needs of the system come into proper view. I'm a non-traditional candidate for the State Board because I have a background in home education. If you'd like to know more about my background, please visit my website, mollenkamp.org, or visit with me.
And with that, we'll start the questioning. Currently, education standards are updated every 7 years. Do you think this process works currently? If not, how would you like to see it revised? You have 60 seconds to respond, and we'll start with you, Mrs. Mollenkamp.
I have no problem with the system beyond the fact that as the standards are revised, the state assessments are also revised, and this interrupts the information we get about how students are doing. I believe there needs to be a basic core that does not change as we go forward so that there's a consistency reflected in the testing, and we can have a better idea of how things are actually progressing. I do agree with the process that's currently taking place and was encouraged that members of the legislature were invited to be a part of the current process of reviewing the math and English language arts standards.
All right, Mrs. Ma.
Thank you. It's hard to strike a balance between what is too long and too short, probably as fast as information is changing these days. You know, in 5 years, everything we know will be doubled. But I think for right now, 7 years is probably about the right time. But by the time you get the standards implemented, you get the new tests in place, you have a chance to try that for a few years, then you're at the 7-year range and you're redoing the standards. So I think we just have to stay in tune with it and make sure that 7 years is not too long, and make sure that we are not changing things so fast that the schools can't adjust their curriculum to match.
For this next question, we'll start with you, Ms. Ma. Do you believe the current level of funding for K through 12 education is sufficient? Should the legislature increase funding for education? You get 60 seconds to respond.
Well, I think we all know the courts are going to answer that question, but since we know that when you include inflation, funding for our schools has been basically flat since 2009, I'm pretty sure the courts are going to come back and say that we have not adequately funded K-12 education. When you look at what we're spending now on basic state aid, which is about $3,800 and some dollars per student, that's barely more than it was 10 years ago. You know we're not keeping up. And it's very important that we fund our schools adequately so that they can give each child what they need to be successful.
All right, Mrs. Mollenkamp.
My concern about the question regarding funding is the fact that there's currently no clear, measurable way to determine whether or not it is accurate or adequate. Somehow the boundaries need to be set. I'm not sure of the best avenue for doing that. The court seems to be inclined toward not being too specific in what it requires, and that's probably appropriate. But at some point, the legislature possibly needs to be the one to somehow set some clear boundaries so that we know when enough is enough. And until then, we really don't know whether it's adequate or not.
Right. This next question. If elected to the State Board of Education, how will you advocate for public schools in Kansas? You get 60 seconds. We'll start with you, Ms. Mollenkamp.
One of my concerns about the conversation currently taking place in Kansas education is that it's so focused on funding and the conflict that has arisen around that. There's an element of strife that I feel takes away from focusing on the good that is happening in our schools and on the potential in our students. So my advocacy would be for a fresh view of Kansas education, one that focuses on meeting the needs of our students and on the success of our students rather than on the conflict that is presented to us in the regular conversation.
Ms. Ma.
Yes, there are a number of ways I plan to advocate for public schools. I am a former public school teacher. I sent my children to public schools. My husband went to public schools. We sent our granddaughter to public schools. I am also a former state legislator. I was in the Kansas House for 8 years. So I know that system. I know how to advocate at the Capitol. I think the state board needs to take a stronger role at the Capitol, advocating for its vision, Kansas Can. We need to have a very strong presence there. I plan to be in the field, visiting the schools that I represent, and I plan to advocate that our public tax dollars only go to public schools. I think that's one of the strongest things I could do as a State Board of Ed member, is to make sure that we fund public schools adequately, that we have great teachers. And so on that case, I plan to fight for strong standards for teacher licensure and for a stronger accreditation system.
House Bill 2292, the bill that would have repealed the Common Core education standards in Kansas, died in the Education Committee in March. Do you support continuing to use Common Core recommendations when setting curriculum standards? We'll start with you, Ms. Ma. You get 90 seconds.
Thank you. As we already discussed, every 7 years we redo our standards. We have now, believe it or not, had Common Core for 7 years, so they're being redone anyway. But I think they were a good basis to start for English and math. Business supports them. The Army supports them. In fact, the Fort Riley generals said that they strongly support Common Core because that means when they have families who travel throughout the nation, that they know when they go from state to state what their students, what their children of the military are going to be learning, and they depend on that. In fact, they said that would be one of the things they would consider in whether or not to stay in Kansas is whether or not we kept Common Core. In any case, those standards are being revised as we speak, and there will be revised standards out next summer. I'm heartened to know that Common Core standards are Kansas standards. Our teachers had a hand in revising those. We only started with the National Common Core standards, and then we Kansasized them, if you will, so that they would meet our needs. So I think it's a great place to start, and we should just build from there.
All right, Mrs. Mullenkamp.
House Bill 2292 actually died in the House Education Committee in the 2015 session because it had not left the committee. It was still alive, and in 2016 it was brought forth again and amended with different language. It did pass the House Education Committee after being amended once again to a simpler form, and was debated on the House floor and was defeated on the House floor. For 4 years, that same debate has taken place in the House Education Committee. Going forward with the standards that are being reviewed, I feel like it's important for the new standards to be compared side by side, both with the current Common Core standards and with the previous standards used and that were in place here in Kansas to determine just what we have going forward. When the standards, Common Core standards, were put in place in 2010, Kansas was only able to add 15% of its own material to the standards. The rest were Common Core. I believe going forward that that ratio should at least be flipped to where the majority of our standards are Kansas standards, Kansas-created standards instead of federal.
Do you see vouchers as competing with public schools or as an enhancement to public education? You have 60 seconds to respond.
Vouchers is perhaps not the only term to be considered. There are other avenues of school choice that have come on the scene in other states, one of those being education savings accounts, where the money goes to the parents and they determine where it will be applied, whether it's a public school or a private setting. And the effect of that on public schools is undetermined and probably hard to determine without trying it. The potential for recognizing the value of what's taught in the private setting and bringing that element into, some of that element into the public setting may be a way of making the public school setting more attractive to those who might pursue the private.
Thank you. I believe that the voucher system, the way it's been implemented, was simply the nose under the tent to a very bad system, and it does compete with public schools for tax dollars. There's absolutely no accountability these days for how those voucher dollars are spent or where they go. You don't even have to be an accredited school. You could be a home school, and there's no reporting requirements for it. You know, it's often done under the guise of, quote, competition, but having worked for a Fortune 100 company for over 20 years, I can tell you honestly that the goal of competition is to eliminate the competition. Vouchers are neither good for our Kansas schools or our Kansas kids. We need a system that has more accountability, and we need to accommodate, we need to give our public schools more flexibility so that they can accommodate every child's needs, but we do not need to be sending tax dollars to private schools.
For this next question, you'll get 60 seconds, and it's a two-part question. What are your thoughts on school district consolidation, Under what conditions would you support consolidation? 60 seconds, and we'll start with you.
Well, I support consolidation at any time two districts or more decide they want to go together. I do not support forced consolidation. When I was in the House, we put out several incentives for school districts to work together. We also provide a system whereby school districts can work together to buy things, for example, on a bulk basis or to be more efficient. But districts are able to figure this out for themselves. They don't have to be forced together. Already in western Kansas and many small districts are working together to share administrators, to share facilities, to share teachers. They've got it figured out. They know when they need to consolidate and do what's right for kids. They don't need the state telling them how to do that. The state may need to assist. Sometimes it's hard to consolidate things, and there are a lot of ways the state can assist that, but we don't need to force it.
I agree with my opponent on this issue. I believe that making that decision at the local level is always the best place for it to be made. And this is the thought that I have heard expressed in the legislature as well. The bill heard in our committee that many considered a consolidation, forced consolidation bill, did not require that. It did not close any schools. It did consider the possibility that there might be a more efficient way to provide administration. Whether that's true or not, the discussion started, and maybe some fruit will come to bear from it in the future.
Do you believe that local school boards ought to have control over curriculum decisions in their districts? Why or why not? You get 60 seconds, Ms. Mollenkamp.
I do believe that the local district is the best place for the curriculum decisions to be made. They're the ones that know what works best in their district. They know the needs of the students there. So I agree that that is the best place for it to be made. I believe that needs to be respected by the other entities in the education system and by the legislature, so that there are not mandates placed upon them that either hinder or interrupt their authority to make those decisions. From the state level, decisions about assessments can directly affect the selection of curriculum, and I think we need to be very careful that decisions made do not in some way take away the authority of the local level.
Kansas is a local control state, and I agree that's the best way to go. The state's job is to set the target. That's what our standards are. But it's best left to the local district to decide how to get there, how to make that target. And I think that's the way it should stay. I think this is one of the areas that the State Board of Education can better advocate at the Capitol. I think too often people come to the legislature with an agenda in mind, and they try to mess with local curriculum and try to override the State Board and try to set specific curricula for schools, and I think that's wrong. So as a State Board member, I would certainly be at the Capitol making sure they do their job and let the State Board do its job, and we in turn will let the local boards do their job.
Recently, USD 497 decided to make condoms available to high school students. What are your thoughts on this policy? We'll start with you, Ms. Ma.
Well, I think it was a very brave step forward. I don't think it was done thoughtlessly or quickly. I think this board here in Lawrence is very thoughtful and forward-thinking. Evidently, they took a look at what's going on in other states around the nation. I think it was Colorado did this statewide, and they saw an incredible drop in teen pregnancy. So I'm sure that was not an easy decision, but I think it was a brave decision, and I'll be interested to see how this works going forward.
Ms. Mollenkamp.
That is a decision that rightfully is made by the local board. They have that authority, and it is my hope that they made that decision based on what they understood to be the will or the desire of the parents of their students as well, and that was taken into consideration in the process. It'll be interesting to see how they find that develops for them whether there are benefits or not. And so I look forward to finding out how that works out.
All right. For this next question, you each get 60 seconds. Do you support state funding of universal preschool?
My thoughts on universal preschool is not particularly favorable of the idea. We have a number of private preschool settings that are successfully helping the youngsters in our communities. We have communities who can work together to provide, see that avenues are provided for opportunities for those students that are in need of the preschool level when parents are perhaps not able to provide it. In general, I believe that that's best left to the private setting, and I see no indication of or support for it, particularly in the Constitution.
Ms. Moss.
I absolutely support the state funding the availability of universal preschool, which is different than mandating universal preschool. I think there are a lot of parents out there who would take advantage of it in the public setting, but there are many, many ways the state could provide preschool education, which they do now through a number of programs, Tiny K and several others that are done in both public and private settings. So universal funding is a great idea. There are a lot of creative ways we can do it. We can take advantage of a lot of things that are already going on in the communities, in private and public settings, but we have to make this happen. There's so much in the research that shows how critical preschool education is to a child's later success. There's just data all over the place that shows when kids enter kindergarten ready to learn, they do so much better with on-time graduation, they stay out of trouble, they get better jobs later on. We just have to make it available.
Do you think schools have a role to provide sexuality education to students? Do you support comprehensive sexuality education that is inclusive for LGBTQIA students? You have 90 seconds.
Thank you. I don't think sexuality is the right term. I don't think we should be teaching kids sexuality. I think we should be teaching them age-appropriate, medically correct sex education so they understand what this is all about. And I think we should include the wide range of sexuality, though, that humans experience, and that should be made available.
Okay.
I agree that it would be my thought that the science-based approach to sex education be taught. Again, I would go back to the question we had regarding the local districts determining curriculum. They do have an authority to make choices about that in this area, and that needs to be respected. I think it's the parents' place to stay involved in the determination of the curriculum, to be aware of what's going on. And I believe the parents' parental role needs to be respected by offering them the opportunity to view the curriculum and by seeking their consent for the student to be involved in the curriculum.
Right. So this next question is long, so you can listen. In June, the State Board of Education voted to ignore the Obama administration's directive on accommodating transgender students, joining a wave of opposition from politicians nationwide who say the decree amounts to federal overreach, arguing that local schools are best suited to decide how to handle issues that transgender students confront in school, including which bathrooms they are allowed to use and which name and gender appears on class rosters and other school records. Do you support this decision? If not, would you want to revisit it again? 60 seconds.
I do support the June decision made by the State Board of Education. Again, as we've referenced before, these decisions belong at the local level. That's where the students are known. That's where the needs of the district and the buildings is known. And that's where the decision can best be made. Again, I would say it's the parents' responsibility and the responsibility of citizens to be aware of what's happening in their district and to be involved in the discussion.
All right, Ms. Small.
I think what the board heard was that our school districts are trying to accommodate transgendered students and do the best they can to make sure that they're not put in danger, not embarrassed, and other things that we've heard about. I do think that they need to review it on an ongoing basis, get some feedback from the schools to see, and from the students for that matter, to see how things are going and see if they need to change that decision. But I think for right now, they were encouraged to let the local districts deal with it. I think we should try that, but review it again next year.
All right. Here is a fun question, 30 seconds. What's your favorite book and why?
Oh, my favorite book right now is Jesus Calling. I read it every morning. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a daily devotional. I don't turn on the TV or anything else till I've read my daily Jesus Calling because it just sets my head straight for the day.
All right, Mrs. Mullenkamp.
Through the years, my favorite book has been The Curate's Awakening by George MacDonald. And it's a book that I believe is out of print and one that many may not be familiar with, but it is one that to me has spoken of eternal matters and earthly matters in a way that helps me to gain a focus and recognize what's really important and what is not.
Why are you qualified to represent District 4 on the State Board of Education? You get 90 seconds. We'll start with you, Mrs. Mullenkamp.
Earlier, I mentioned that I'm a non-traditional candidate for the state board. I recognize that, and I recognize that it's really a very realistic concern for a number of people. I also mentioned that my decision to file as a candidate grew out of my work with the House Education Committee. In that setting, I did gain an awareness of the public education issues from the state level. And those two aspects of my background, diverse aspects, give me what's probably a one-of-a-kind perspective on education, a unique perspective that I believe can allow me to ask questions and offer ideas that others might not consider. Education is in a period of change, not just in Kansas, but across the country. And there's a need to consider what needs to change and what needs to be maintained. While I am an out-of-the-box thinker regarding education, I value the foundation that has been laid, and I recognize that to let go of that without due process of thoughts would be harmful. And we need to go forward, building on the foundation and recognizing what needs to be changed.
Mrs. Mall.
I think my credentials for this position are very good. I have both a bachelor's and master's degree in education. I taught high school science for 5.5 years in public schools. I actually served when I was in business at Southwestern Bell, which is where my career was, as the public representative in the 90s on a team that actually rewrote the language arts standards at that time, so I'm familiar with that process. I served on the Kansas Department of Education QPA Advisory Council, accrediting schools when that process first began. I served on the Kansas Advisory Council on Career and Technical Education at 2 different times, once as an employee and manager at Southwestern Bell, and then later as a state representative. In fact, I helped write the government track that they use now in high schools for students who want to explore the opportunity to do public service. I served in the House on both the Education and the Higher Education committees, and I championed the bill that created the Technical Education Authority, so high school students would have more opportunities to get technical training and certificates in high school and have a better transition into work. Lastly, I've served for the last 15 years on what used to be the North Central Association, now the Advanced Ed State Committee, accrediting both public and private schools. So I have both the public and private perspective on education.
Well, that's all the time that we have. Thank you for joining the Voter Education Coalition and WOW 6 for our general forum. The general election will be held November 8th. A special thanks to all the candidates for joining us, and thank you to the City of Lawrence for providing this venue as well as for their videotaping services. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
We will begin. Welcome to the Voter Education Coalition and WOW 6 General Election Forum. I'm 6 News anchor Stephanie Bryant and your moderator for the evening. The Voter Education Coalition is a nonpartisan organization that sponsors candidate forums, meet and greets, and other events to educate citizens about candidates and their policies. You can learn more about the VEC and their events by visiting their Facebook page at facebook.com/VEC DGKS or their website at votereducationcoalition.org. WOW 6 will be showing a replay of this forum several times over the next few weeks, starting October 19th. It will also be available anytime on demand and on 6lawrence.com. We would like to thank the City of Lawrence and their staff for the use of their facility and all their help in making this event possible. All candidates were invited, but not all were able to attend. Now, the rules for the forum are simple. I will be asking questions, and each question will have a designated response time. Candidates, you will answer the questions, and at the end of this period, you'll hear a bell, and we'll move on to the next candidate or question. We will rotate the order of responses between each candidate. There will not be any rebuttals and no questions from the candidates. Each candidate will have 60 seconds to open, and with that, we will start things off with you, Bassem.
Thank you so much for having me here today. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit of myself real quick. I was born in United Arab Emirates. I came here in 2001 and went to Free State High School, where I met my high school sweetheart. I have 2 kids. So keep asking myself, why did I want for a public servant? Well, I never had the courage, but I never had the courage until I felt the burn. So with that being said is why I'm going to ensure that our county is capable of meeting the needs of our mentally ill residents, mental health crisis center, of course, bring in good jobs, and affordable housing. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Thellman.
Hi, I'm Nancy Thellman. I'm the County Commissioner for the 2nd District, have been for 2 terms, 8 years. I've lived in the 2nd District for 16 years, almost 17 at the end of this year. I'm really proud to be up here at this table with you all. Thank you so much for being brave enough to put yourselves out there. Campaigning is hard, and local politics can be brutal. And so thank you for being willing to get up here and do this. A special thanks to Jesse, who's made the bold move of just moving to the 2nd District and running for office. He's done a good job starting a listening campaign, and there are 36,000 people in the 2nd District to listen to, lots of diverse voices and lots to be learned. I've been born and raised in Lawrence, Kansas, have a nursing degree from KU, Master of Divinity from Vanderbilt University, worked at Lawrence Memorial for a while, also was an associate pastor at First Presbyterian and Plymouth Congregational, and now I'm a county commissioner.
All right, Mr. Benson.
My name is Jesse Brinson. I've been living here in Lawrence for the last 15 years, a graduate of University of Kansas, and my full-time job is I'm a youth minister, and that's what I've been doing over the last 12 years. Really enjoy it. I've been married 11 years, going on 12, and my wife and I have 3 wonderful biological kids, a boy and 2 girls, and then 4 older foster boys who are out and living their life, wiping their own bottoms now. So we, over the last 12 years, been serving families, working with young men, trying to take them from one step to the next. And as you know, if you're working with a teen, you have to get to know their culture and their family. And so really working with families, listening to them, helping them take steps to better themselves. And so, and that's what I want to do, not only listening to the families, but listening to the people of our county, and move the county in steps that they would ask, that they're asking to be had. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Michelle Derusseau. A former county commissioner said, "You don't know what you don't know until you're sitting behind that desk." So I have made it my mission that if elected, I will be as prepared as possible. Providing for the safety and well-being of over 116,000 citizens should not be taken lightly. It's a serious commitment. I attended weekly county commission meetings for 3.5 months before filing to run because I wanted to make sure I had a full understanding of the commitment I was making. I have spent the last 11 and a half months attending budget meetings, commission meetings, township meetings, and community meetings. With more and more financial burden being placed on local government, it is imperative that we have informed, unbiased, proven leaders who can work together to make responsible decisions for our citizens and with our tax dollars. 3 decades of civic engagement and my preparation over the past year show my dedication to service and my commitment to the citizens of Douglas County.
All right. With that, we will begin. Our first question. What is your position on the Douglas County Jail expansion proposal? What did the official report issued by the county address or not address? You get 90 seconds to respond, and we'll start with you, Ms. Thellman.
So being part of the county commission for the past 8 years, this has been part of our conversation for a long time. We've spent the last 3 years studying this issue hard, bringing in outside consultants with special expertise in mental health and de-incarceration and diversion practices. We've visited with lots of local agency experts and stakeholders and had lots of public town hall meetings. The fact of the matter is that our jail is over capacity, and it has been for a while. We spend over $1 million now paying other counties to take care of our excess inmates, where they are away from their families, they're away from their lawyers, they're away from the nationally recognized reentry services that we offer at the jail. And so they're not getting the benefit of some of the things that we can try to teach while in jail to help them be better when they're out and help them not come back to jail. Our women have inadequate facilities. Folks with special mental health issues and special needs have completely inadequate facilities. Our sense is that we can do better in Douglas County. We have both compassion for these people and a sense not just of justice, but doing right by our citizens, both on the outside and on the inside. And what's really been clear to me, we have an expert consultant who's also a local citizen. She's nationally recognized, and she's worked all of her adult life on this issue and said that of all the places she's worked, this is one of 2 places she would recommend a jail expansion.
Mr. Vinson.
For me, I want to definitely see the two decoupled, the Mental Health Crisis Prevention Center and the jail expansion. I realized that we were wanting to spend $30 million in expanding the jail, but the community is asking for alternatives. I don't think in the report they have talked about the alternatives that they actually have went after and showed the reports on that. I think we could take that $30 million and look for alternatives that would also lower our inmate population, but really put our hope and our sense of what it means to be compassionate for people. I know that there's a third of our population that are in there, and I realize that much of our women are being housed in different counties, which makes me think, why aren't these women given the opportunity to have alternatives where they could, something similar to an ankle bracelet or something that would help these women be back home with their families, nurturing their kids, and if they're married, loving their husbands. So my thought with that is that we could definitely take the $30 million and look for alternatives. It's always preferable that we put our money in the people and not projects. Look for services that would better our people and not more structures. So thank you.
Ms. Derusseau.
May I ask you to repeat the question, please?
Yes. What is your position on the Douglas County Jail expansion proposal? And what did the official report issued by the county address or not address? 90 seconds.
If we as a community truly want to address the mental health issue, we need to address the entire system to make sure that no individuals fall through the cracks. There will be mentally ill individuals who will need to be incarcerated. We have a moral and legal obligation to care for them, to provide an environment that will alleviate, not exacerbate, their symptoms. We also have a moral and legal obligation to ensure the safety of our community and the safety of the incarcerated, as well as a responsibility to reintegrate people into society. We have a nationally recognized reentry program. How do we ensure those who will benefit most from it have access to it? The County Commission formed and is funding a Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, and they're making great strides towards addressing some of these issues. As far as I'm concerned, with the formation of the CJCC, the ballot question, as previously discussed, no longer exists. The county, through their commitment, has sent a message they are willing to look deeper into this issue, and I have not seen an official proposal. But I fully support studying possible options to both, and that's why I have attended and continue to attend the jail and mental health town hall meetings and study sessions, the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council meetings with Bert Nash, staff, and other local organizations who serve our mentally ill community members, meetings with the sheriff, the DA, the director of the reentry program. The critical nature of this issue is a perfect example of why it's imperative we have informed and proven leaders to continue this conversation and work together as a community.
I visited the jail about 3 or 4 times, and the reason why I visited it too many times is because I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw 4 to 6 women in one room. I thought maybe the first time something happened, that's why there's 4 to 6 women in one room. It only holds 2, so there's literally like a bed on the floor, and 2 beds. And I went there a couple, 3 times, and it was still over capacity. I mean, something needs to be done. That's why this project started in 1999, right? So I feel like there should be a redesign and a completion, because this did not make sense to me and it was just not right. As for having both of them the same ballot, I'm the one that started the decoupling movement in the papers, and I think people need to vote what they want to vote for, either through Mental Health Crisis Center or and the jail expansion. For example, I will vote yes on both, but I want people to have their choice as well. But lawyers have to travel for hours to meet with their clients because they're being farmed out. And with that being said, being farmed out means costs money. And I believe they will stay in jail longer because the lawyer couldn't go visit the other person as well that day because they had to go 2 to 3 hours to visit this one client. So something obviously needs to be done. What it is, I mean, I think there needs to be a completion or a redesign of that jail. Thank you.
Right. Many of you had talked about mental health. How would you address mental health issues in the county? You have 90 seconds, and we'll start with you, Mr. Brinson.
One of the things I've done is I've gone door to door, and like I said, one of the things over the last 12 years is really heard from people that they feel like they're not being heard from politicians. And so the first step would be to talk with the people in the mental health careers. I would talk with the doctors. I would talk with psychiatrists. I would talk with the current our staff at Bert Nash. I want to hear from them. I want to hear from families who are in the mental health situation that person themselves, or if they have a child or a loved one in there. I want to hear what are some things they want to see improved by our system. If you notice, and you can look across the nation, systems target poor people, and if it does not have someone to defend for them, the unfortunate, they fall into the system and they end up, quote unquote, in the jails, or they end up not being cared for. So that was the first thing I would want to do. I would want to talk to them, seeing where they're being left out, seeing where they feel like they're not being cared, and then begin to dialogue and to collaborate with known institutions that would help bring about a change to our system, so that our poor, that our unfortunate, that our those who are not being recognized would have the attention that they are asking for.
Mrs. Derusseau.
As I mentioned, I've spent a lot of time the last 11 and a half months meeting. I've met with the Bert Nash staff on more than one occasion. I've met with other local groups that work with the mentally ill in our community. As the president of the Lawrence Police Foundation, one of the things that we've been doing for the past year and a half is providing the funding for crisis intervention team training. And for those of you that don't know, it's a 40-hour course which prepares law enforcement and other individuals in the community to better respond to individuals who are experiencing a mental health crisis. So we recognized the need for that a year and a half ago, and as soon as we finished our AED project, that was where we turned our focus. To date, we've funded training for, I think, about 150, 154 individuals throughout Douglas County. So my goal is to continue meeting with the stakeholders, the people who know our community, who know our mentally ill community members and how best to deal with them. And you know, another factor that comes into play, of course, is budget cuts. So that's going to be an important thing. I saw it this year when we did the 2017 budget, or when they did the 2017 budget hearings. We're going to have to remember that those are the most vulnerable people in our community, and we need to take care of them.
Right. Mr. Shaheen.
Okay, we have a mental health crisis. I mean, that's for sure. As a business owner downtown, I see it every day. I mean, the same guy who I see is taken by the police, is there the next day. So something has to be fixed with that, and that's why I'm all about the need of a mental health crisis center. Something has to be done, and maybe, you know, you can go further as, okay, if they do go to a mental health crisis center, what happens afterward? Maybe work with the housing authority, work with the reentry program at the jail as well. But yeah, I mean, I do see that there's a need for a mental health crisis center, and we do have a mental health crisis. And thank you.
So the state has really walked away from its responsibility to provide adequate funding for mental health, certainly at the state level with decent state hospitals, and at the local level, defunding millions of dollars from Burt Nash. And over the years, the county has done its best to find money in the budget to keep programs whole and to make sure we don't lose necessary case managers and psych helpers through Burt Nash and other agencies. But it's been a struggle. So our sense is that it's time for Douglas County to add another level of mental health care in our community. And it's a serious step and it's an expensive step, but we think it's urgent and necessary, and that is to add the Mental Health Crisis Center. But before that, we do have a strong record on mental health. We've well-funded Burt Nash. We've funded the RAP program in our middle schools and high schools to provide a psychologist in all of those schools to help identify needs in our younger kids. We'd like to have them in the elementary age, but haven't gotten there yet. The Crisis Center would provide sobering, detox, 14 days of inpatient residential care under psychiatric and counseling, peer counseling services. An additional benefit to the Crisis Center would be that we believe it would decrease the jail population by about 12 to 15 people on an average daily basis. So that's an additional benefit. It's clear when you walk and you knock on doors, every household has a story to tell, and it's very clear that this is a serious situation in our community. It's time to take action, not just to talk.
Here's a two-part question. What are your budget priorities, and how would you balance expenditures with potential mill levy increases? You have 90 seconds, and we'll start with you, Mrs. Derusseau.
Well, probably the biggest priority, of course, is the jail and the mental health crisis center issue. And as I mentioned, that's going to be an ongoing process. So there's no easy answer to that until there's a proposal in front of us to exactly know what we're even dealing with. Another priority to me is with the new concealed carry law going into effect next year. It's going to be important that, especially at the health department building where Burt Nash is, and the health department, there are a number of individuals coming and going with mental health issues. We need to find a way to have secure entrances where we know that people are not entering with weapons. So I know that there's already been a couple of studies done looking at that. We also need to look at the courthouse and the safety there, because we have a large number of community members as well as employees who are in that building day after day. So we need to be able to protect them and make sure that weapons are not entering the building. The studies that have been looked at are, pretty expensive, but you have to weigh the public safety need. I'm sorry, I forgot the second part of that.
How would you balance expenditures with potential mill levy increases?
Well, that'll be something that we'll have to be careful with because of the tax law lid that also goes into effect. This budget kind of built in a cushion, we hope, so that we won't have to worry about it. But in 2018, there will be a lid, so mill levies will not be allowed to to increase more than the rate of inflation. So it's going to take responsible, informed decision makers to take care of that.
All right. Mr. Shane.
Obviously, the budget will go through the jail and the mental health crisis center. I think that has the highest budget, and I'm definitely not for sales tax, and I know that will hire the meal levy, and again, and especially for public safety as well. As for how, or what the second question was?
How would you balance expenditures with potential mill levy increases?
I mean, yeah, you are going to have responsible answers for that, and I mean, depends what's brought into me and how we figure out the whole budgeting, but I think that's all I have for now.
So when it comes to the proposed jail facility changes in the Mental Health Crisis Center, we got enabling legislation a couple years ago from the state legislature that allows us to have a public referendum which would create some kind of tax funded either through sales tax or mill levy or a combination of the both to pay for the significant expense of those facilities. So that's taken care of by our relationship with the state legislature. In terms of the local budget, we go through a long process every year. We weigh our wants and needs very carefully to see what our core services are, and we're dedicated to those first: public health, public safety, decent roads and bridges, a well-funded capital improvement plan, so we're taking care of what we have. When it comes to new programs, we weigh whether they're a significant benefit to the public, and we try to find the money for that. We try to pay our significant numbers of staff, well over 400 employees. We make sure that they're paid comparatively, so we don't have a lot of staff turnover. So we study our benefits and our staffing, our salaries pretty extensively to make sure that we're a fair and good employer and have a good county system that helps us bring great public services to this community. But with the tax lid, Michelle is right, the tax lid changes everything. The state has taken away the local control of our budget, so our ability to do what's necessary now has become much, much more complicated.
Mr. Benson.
I believe that elected officials should not approach their governance with spending priorities. It isn't their money to spend, it belongs to taxpayers. Taxpayers should be heard in how elected officials spend their tax money. My top priority as commissioner will be to listen to voters so that we can find better solutions to challenges that concern them. 3 areas that come up consistently when I visit with people are the provisions of better treatment for those experiencing a mental health crisis, the need for solutions to jail overpopulation, and the continuation of excellent county services, roads, and facilities.
Right. Are you willing to implement a formal system of accountability for taxpayer funds that are allocated by the county to outside agencies such as social services, Chamber of Commerce, etc.? You get 60 seconds, and we start with you, Mr. Shaheen.
So I'm all about bringing jobs in our county. And if that needs to be that we need to do something with the Chamber of Commerce in Baldwin, in Eudora, and Lawrence in order to bring in businesses and primary businesses over here, then yes, I just have to see what they have to offer. So bringing in growth, for sure, and then public safety as well. And if we can have the best, if there's something missing, as like we need more, like a fire department. Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, so for example, like in North Lawrence, I see that we don't have a place for a grocery store, so we're, what's it called, a food desert. So obviously if we can somehow help with bringing in a grocery store so people can go buy food using their food stamps and whatnot. So yes, I'm all for about helping to bring our community together and stronger.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. Are you willing to implement a formal system of accountability for taxpayer funds that are allocated by the county to outside agencies, such as social services, chamber of commerce, etc.?
We do have a formal system of accountability for taxpayer funds. Every year, we do a careful study of all of the community partners that we fund regularly. Anyone who receives money from the county has to justify the money they receive every year. It's not a blanket approval. So we look at their budgets, we hear from their leadership. The numbers are studied and our budget is studied. Each partner has to make their case to us. They enter into a partnership contract with us. They have oversight from our county, particularly through the assistant county administrator. And we have year-end reports, and then when the next budget starts, everyone has to justify their request for the budget again. So all of these numbers are public record. Every part of our budget process is public record. Every agency we give taxpayer dollars to has a budget that is public record. None of our partners are funded in secret or behind closed doors.
Yes, I would. I didn't know that that's what we had, but I definitely would want to advertise it more so people would know exactly where their taxpayer dollars are going. I think it's important for people to not only know where it's going, but regularly be reminded so that they had questions, if they had thoughts, they know who to exactly talk to, and how to get their questions, answers, comments processed. So I agree that a transparent, I'm sorry, I forgot the exact words you used, but being transparent with the agencies we're working with is definitely something I would want to implement or make more noticeable.
All right, Mrs. Derusseau.
I mean, I'm not going to say I don't agree with it. I mean, it's always an option, but our county is very transparent. The 22 community partner agencies, they submit a budget and their needs to the county administrator. He goes through it. That is all presented to the county commissioners. The county commissioners have public hearings. I attended the public hearings. There were 2 of them. There was also a budget work study session. They're all open to the public. They're all published in the newspaper. Nobody's trying to, I didn't see where anyone was trying to hide anything. So the public's welcome to come in and ask questions. The budget is published on the internet. All of these agencies publish their information on their websites. It's all available. I mean, if it came down to someone actually saying that they distrusted the system and have questions about how the county is managing their money with the community partner agencies that serve our most vulnerable citizens, then I guess it's something that the commission would have to look at.
What is the county's role in supporting workforce development initiatives? What is an appropriate level of funding for such initiatives? You each have 60 seconds, and we'll start with you, Ms. Thellman.
It's been known for decades that our community has needed workforce training. We have some high-level training for biosciences, but in terms of folks who are needing to be retrained in skills for manufacturing or computer tech, those kind of things, Lawrence and Douglas County has really been short on that. So the county, along with the city and Chamber, helped create the Peasley Center, which started with 0 students and now has over 300. We fund it generously, but it needs more. That's really one of my highest priorities, is to make sure that the Peasley Center becomes just an absolute magnet for people who need that extra training to help them get great jobs, and then be out in the workforce with decent wages. They learn all sorts of technical skills as well as life skills there. Excellent staff, excellent leadership, and it's something I'm really proud that the county is part of. We have a lot of other efforts in terms of workforce training, and the USD 497 has their own program as well. So we've made a lot of progress in a very short time.
I think the county's role is as equal as the city's role with workforce training. With funding, though, what I would like to do is continue to see us not only work towards bettering families and families, and starting with younger the kids. There's a study out called ACEs, where kids, if they have 4 of the 10 things that ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, happen to them themselves would return and be a part of that same statistical study in the sense of having one of those ACEs. And what happens is if we don't provide the adequate training for these kids or the teachers who are teaching them, those kids will continue to perform low on their academic state testing. And so what happens is as these kids continue to go through the school system, they graduate with basically poor academics, and then they graduate in what kind of job do they have now? What kind of job can you get with a below high school or a non-college education? So I would like to see us focus that.
I'm really excited about Peaslee Tech. I've been out there several times to meet with Marvin. To me, it's one of the best-kept secrets in Douglas County. It meets needs that local businesses have for workforce training. It's a catalyst for economic growth because it's providing technical training. And for anybody that remembers, a couple years ago, we actually lost a business that wanted to come to Douglas County because we didn't have a system set up to offer technical training. And now Peaslee Tech is doing that. As Nancy said, I mean, they started last year, their first year, their goal was 100 students. They had 150. This year's goal was 200, and they're at 305. They have 5 labs, and they're getting ready to add an automotive one for those of you who may have seen it in the paper. It's another need. Our local car dealers need mechanics. So 6 of them are willing to go together and pledge, I think it's $50,000 apiece over the next 5 years to get that done and provide that training to our individuals who need an alternative to a 4-year college.
We do need the workforce training, and a really great example is the Peaslee Center. When I was in leadership in Lawrence, we went there to visit it. And from there, I learned that, it's a good start because that's where you go learn, you go there to learn technical, mechanical, and auto. And with that being said, of course, those are livable wages that they can get when they get out for the workforce. And also, with that, having businesses like this, a workforce training facilities, it's also attractive for primary businesses to come to our county and open up a location where they can hire people from our county and be comfortable for them to go train on what exactly they do in that business. So,
How can the county best address the growing gap in senior services? Start with you. You get 60 seconds.
Talk to the seniors. Talk to your senior citizens. Attend their groups. Many of them are attending their neighborhood associations, their civic clubs. I would start there. Seeing what is it that they were asking for. What do they see? Some of the needs that are approaching, and I haven't talked directly with them, but I know some aren't happy with the current housing, why their current building is being remodeled, the Station 1, I believe, where senior services are being held. So did anyone talk to them first before saying, hey, let's put them in this building, why their current building is being remodeled? So my first step, and the best answer I can give at this moment, is first talking with the senior citizens about what is it that you would like to see done.
Mr. Russo.
I've attended several meetings with Dr. Williamson, who's taken over Douglas County Senior Services, and she's brought some great ideas, but there is a need. There was a marketing program to invite retirees to Lawrence. I think it started in 2012. And so we started attracting more and more retirees, and then found that we couldn't keep up with the services that they needed. So it's kind of been an uphill battle to try to get caught up. They've been working closely with the fire department and the county commission and the city commission on renovating the building they're in. They're very excited about it. Sorry, but the place is a dump. So they're very excited to get it fixed. They don't know where right now they're going to be in the meantime. The fire station and senior services will be moved. But, I mean, it's a serious concern. If we're going to invite people to our community, we need to provide the services that they need. So, okay.
And just like Jesse said, listen to them and see what their needs are. Going door to door, when I met with a few senior citizens, I mean, their main concern was affordable housing and how can they live here, especially being that the average house right now for rent is about $800 to $900 a month. That's just rental units. So yeah, that's the main concern that I keep hearing when I keep talking, going door to door. But I mean, other than that, and the sales tax being so high, that's what I got.
Ms. Thellman.
So there's been a lot of turnover at the senior center while I've been a commissioner. We've gone through several executive directors, but we have just a phenomenal director now in Marvel Williamson, Dr. Williamson. Through her leadership, the board and a lot of the stakeholders in the senior population have come up with a new vision and mission and goal strategy sessions for the senior service center. We know that they need to meet the needs of more than just the very elderly folks in our community. The county has committed to working with the city to remodel that fire station, bring it up to 21st century standards, which means a very significant expense, but it's completely needed and worth it for the seniors. In the meantime, while we work with them to have a better facility, the county started a CHAMPS senior meal program, which is countywide and has met the needs of a lot of folks who are needing lunches in decent places. Lots more to say on seniors, but sorry to go over time.
This next question, we'll start with you, Mrs. Derusseau. How can the county best address the growing gap for services with people with disabilities? 60 seconds.
We have some great community partner agencies in Douglas County, Independence, Inc., Cottonwood, and once again, you know, it's going to come down to prioritizing and being informed because of budget cuts that they're receiving at state and federal levels. So keeping that chain of communication open, figuring out their needs, being able to prioritize and see where, you know, different agencies and services can collaborate and maybe combine efficiencies for better services. That would be where I would start.
Cottonwood is a great example. I feel like we have a lot of services here for them. We just don't have the jobs for them to get. And that's the problem that I think that we are having. But again, I don't feel like there's, unless you want minimum wage jobs in town and through Cottonwood and other services, that's literally the only places they can tell you where to go work. That's it. I don't think there's a lot of jobs for people with disability here in town. Thank you.
Can you repeat the question again?
Yes. How can the county best address the growing gap for services with people with disabilities? 60 seconds.
Well, first of all, we need to know what the gap is. So to assume there's a gap and to know what it actually is and what the solutions are for it probably deserves conversations with lots of stakeholders and agencies. We spend a tremendous amount of money at the county on special social services, Independence, Inc., and Cottonwood, like Michelle and Bossum talked about. We spend about $6 million on social services trying to help folks with special needs in their quality of life. But you don't have to just spend money to help folks with accessibility issues and disability issues. A really strong planning department that knows how to plan for accessibility, good sidewalks and ramps and walkable and kind of human scale developments helps folks with issues with mobility, making sure we plan transportation not just for cars but for pedestrians, and not just for pedestrians, but pedestrians that are in motorized wheelchairs or walkers. And then also if we would commit ourselves to the universal code that would help with accessibility issues in housing and commercial spaces and open places in our communities, it would go a long way.
Mr. Winston.
how would I begin to address the growing gap, or how should the county begin to address the gap? I would have to agree with much of what Ms. Thellman said. First, you would have to start with them and asking those with disabilities, what are some of the needs you're seeing, whether it be in your roads, the different stores, as you go out into the community, what would you like us to address? I'm not someone with a disability, so I couldn't say that I go out and see exactly what they're needing. So I would start with them and ask, what is it that you're asking for, and how can we help? That's my short answer to that. But I want to say this, that I ran into a young fella that I was coaching, and he showed up at LHS while I was having lunch with a kid one day, and he was working with a young man with disabilities, and I never took that guy to be someone who would want to work with someone with disabilities. And so my next thought then I would want to ask the county is, man, can we put some funding into mentorship where people like this young man have more opportunities to do something he enjoys, which is spending time with folks with disabilities. So.
This next question will start with you, Mr. Shaheen. How much are you willing to spend to ensure public safety in light of the change in concealed carry laws? Is it necessary to add security? 60 seconds.
I don't know too much about what changes that needs to be done if you have conceal and carry, but public safety is my number one, and so whatever means necessary by talking to the police department or the sheriff's office to see what needs to be done. If it's something that it's okay, I would definitely don't want to allow it in our schools, that's for sure, or in our stores, like grocery stores and what's our public areas, like our community buildings or places like this. But yeah, I think I don't know too much about it, and I just want to make sure there is just public safety in general.
So this is a complicated issue and one that was brought on us by the state legislature. So my hope would be that the legislature would improve the laws around this and not cause the local communities to have to spend millions and millions and millions of dollars in order to try and provide a level of safety. The study that was done for the county courthouse showed us that it was going to be multiple millions of dollars to provide the kind of technical protection that would allow us to put the sign on the door that no guns are allowed. So we're having to make adjustments. We don't have millions and millions and millions of extra tax dollars to staff at doors and put gun metal detectors and all of the equipment at every door in every county building. The cost is extraordinary, and we need those tax dollars for other public services. So I agree that Burt Nash is a special instance. It may be that that is a building that has enough special needs around it with volatility and certain concerns that we probably need to take a good, strong look at special efforts around the Burt Nash facility. But in terms of the fairgrounds, the courthouse, the public works facility, it's the entire budget if you want to make it secure against guns.
Mr. Prince.
I think it is necessary to have securities. I know there's a lot of people who are concerned about folks having the ability to conceal and carry guns. Someone who is a conceal and carry person, I also wonder what the larger population of people who are conceal and carry, how they feel also about where their taxpayer dollars would go. And so I would first ask both parties, what do you think? Where are you at on this issue? And then present to them an idea that I think would work for both. But as I said, I do think it's important that people feel safe. That people feel safe, and that is important. So.
Ms. Derusseau.
As I mentioned previously, my top priority for the security would be at the Burt Nash Mental Health, the Health Department building, I'm sorry. Public safety is a necessity. I mean, the mission statement of the county starts to provide for the safety and well-being of the citizens of Douglas County. It's one of the 6 core services of the county. It's our number one responsibility to take care of our citizens. So the Health Department building, because of Burt Nash, I think is the #1 priority. I think it needs to be addressed. The county has already received a letter from the tenants in that building asking them to start looking into it because they have concerns for their safety and the safety of their clients. It's a really complicated building because there's more than one parking lot and there's more than one entrance. So it would probably require closing one of those entrances, so there's only one entrance that you have to have, personnel there to make sure that there's no one coming in with a gun and the equipment there to screen them. And I think each study, each entrance, whether it was at the county courthouse or at Burt Nash building, was about $1.25 million, but it has to be addressed.
Is that everyone?
Oh, I think I answered.
Yeah.
Same question?
No, you've answered, okay.
Okay.
Sorry. Had a moment there. All right, these are questions. This question is from the audience. How would you address the concerns of groups such as Black Lives Matter and Standing Rock? You get 60 seconds, and we'll start with you, Ms. Thellman.
With me? Stop.
Ms. Thellman.
Are we alternating?
Yes, everyone gets to answer, so.
Okay. All right, didn't know it was my turn. So my sense is that inside the chamber of the Douglas County Courthouse, it's a local government. There's an obligation of the elected people inside that commission to have a sense of the representative nature of government. And so I would want to hear the voices of the Black Lives Matters people and the folks with Standing Rock. I certainly know that there are active groups out there in the community, and our meetings are open to anyone. We're happy to have people come and make public comment. We certainly wouldn't stop anyone from making public comment. So I'm happy to listen and learn. I'm not interested in making commitments around a few words. I want to dig into the issue and work with people in a productive way. So it's a complicated issue. It's a powerful issue. It's a really hard struggle, both in our community and across the nation, and frankly around the world, how we work with each other when we know that there are folks who are disenfranchised and needing more power and needing more voice. So I'm happy to have that conversation.
Mr. Benson.
I think when we hear about Black Lives Matter, Standing Rock, you see an organization of people who are frustrated, who are angry. They feel like they're not being heard, and they're passionate to see their changes come about. And so I think the first step would be to actually attend their meetings, pull some of their directors aside, some of their attendees aside, have coffee, whatever it is, to make sure we're approaching them and hearing what it is that is done. That they're wanting to see done, and really hearing them out. I think part of their argument is that they're not understood, and I think anyone could say that, no matter if you're a senior citizen, if you're disabled, if you're inmate, a nurse, you want to be understood. We all want to be understood, and I think that should be the first step to, okay, let me first try to understand what it is that they're asking for.
Yeah. I think it's important as an elected official that you always make a point to look at processes to make sure that there are no injustices. And I think you also need to lead by example. There isn't a place in government for bullying or intimidation or racism, intolerance or ignorance. There's an open door at the courthouse. Anybody can come to those meetings and they can talk about any issue that's sensitive to them, any needs that they think are not being met, any injustices that they're concerned about. As a county commissioner, I would be happy to attend meetings if invited, as long as those meetings met the guidelines, because once elected, there are open meeting laws, and there are only certain things that you can do. So, I have no problem meeting with people, but for the most part, what everybody sometimes doesn't understand is that there are laws once you're an elected official about what you can go to and how the meeting is set up. And that's why normally you're invited to come to the public meetings at the courthouse where all three commissioners can be there to hear.
Mr. Shaheen.
Okay. I stand in solidarity with Black Lives Matter and Standing Rock. I mean, we have to hear them out, talk to them. I'm an Arab American. I have been feeling the same way they have since 2001, and yet did not get any answers. So I feel like we have to just hear them out and see what they have to say.
Here's another audience question. Please define your position on continuing to provide funding for the protection of historic, natural, and cultural resources within the county. How should the amount of funding be determined? 60 seconds. Mr. Brinson.
I think our natural resources and land should be preserved. As far as funding and how we put the funding in to protect that, that's a good question. I think when we think about our budget and when it's time to budget, we put that before the people. We put that before the taxpayers. This is what we're thinking about allocating. This is what we're thinking about allocating this to that. This is what that means for this and not that. And so, and once if we show ourselves transparent, there's going to be some time where we have to cut things and we lose things, and hopefully it doesn't upset people. But I would like to continue to see our natural resources and our different landmarks continue to be preserved and tampered with. So,
Mr. Derusseau.
Douglas County has a very unique and diverse geography. I mean, it's a beautiful county. You can drive from one part to another, and it's like almost like leaving the state. They're so different. Our history is, I mean, we have some amazing history here in Douglas County and some very passionate individuals who put their heart and soul into maintaining that history so that it's not lost forever. Because there have been, unfortunately, buildings and other things that have been lost due to neglect and a lack of funding because people were dragging their feet or whatever reason. But, you know, this is all part of the budget process, like everything else. We have some great community partner agencies. One of them, for example, is Freedom's Frontier Heritage. They get money from the county, but they also get federal funding, and through that federal funding, sometimes they can match the dollars that the county gives. And by the county showing that they have that commitment, it makes it easier. The federal government sees that commitment and they're willing to match those dollars. So they're doubling that, and we need to continue that because.
Sorry, can you repeat that question one more time?
Please define your position on continuing to provide funding for the protection of historic, natural, and cultural resources within the county. How should the amount of funding be determined? 60 seconds.
If elected Douglas County Commissioner, I will keep funding our historical, to protect our historical and natural resources. I mean, like I said before, if you want our county to look like Topeka, then it's probably because we weren't funding it enough. But again, I'm going to keep funding it. We're going to keep funding it, making sure Lawrence and our county is known because of its history, and I'm going to try to keep it that way.
Ms. Thellman.
So back when I was a pretty new commissioner, around 2010 or so, I called together a group of stakeholders that included folks from the historical societies as well as Freedom's Frontier and other agencies. And we determined that we thought there was a way to invest in our local historic resources and unique lands to provide ways to preserve and protect those things that really we won't get back. If you don't plan and protect and help pay for the preservation, these are the kind of things you lose. So I with a long process and finally support from my other county commissioners, started the Heritage Conservation Council, which invests $350,000 a year in a competitive grant program. Over the years, it's been responsible for saving quite a few historic structures as well as preserving hundreds of acres of prime agricultural land and a very large section of the Baldwin Woods. It's a remarkable program with great support from folks out in the county, and it has garnered well over $1 million of outside money to help get those projects done.
This next question will start with you, Mrs. Derusseau. What is an appropriate response time when responding to your constituents? What is your policy in returning calls, emails, and texts? 60 seconds.
I think they need to be returned. I'm sorry, I'm smiling because there's some people in this room that I have corresponded with through email or phone calls. I think that they need to be answered within 24 hours. If you can't do it same day, it needs to at least be within 24 hours. And if you don't have the answer for them or a way to resolve their issue, whatever it is, at least get back with them and say, I received your email or I received your message and I'm looking into it further so I can get you the information that you need or so we can better address this for you. I think it's, I mean, I know that I don't appreciate it when I contact an elected official and don't receive a response. I know that they're busy, I know they have a lot to do, but as I said, yeah, at least within 24 hours, get back to them and say, I received it, and I will respond with a complete answer as soon as possible.
Mr. Sheen.
If I get elected, I will be your employee. I will be your public servant. And if I don't answer your phone, you can yell at me if you like. I wouldn't mind. So, but yes, I will be there. I mean, I'm all over social media. My phone is probably everywhere online, so I'm really easy to reach as well. So, if it's more than 24 hours, I mean, I will definitely apologize.
I am so grateful these days for smartphones and the ability to answer emails so quickly from wherever I am. Sometimes there isn't a lot of communications, and then something will pop up and you're just overwhelmed with emails or phone calls, and it to be honest, it can be hard to keep up. But we have a responsive county. When I'm not able to come up with an answer immediately, I'm able to talk with Craig Weinog or any of the other department heads at the county, and they're incredibly responsive and able to come up with solutions to complicated questions. My cell phone and my email are posted on the county website. Whenever I'm on the radio, I give my cell phone freely, 550-7754. That's what's good about Douglas County, is that we're still a small enough county that we know each other a lot of times by name, and no one's afraid to call the county commissioner or to call Craig Weinog directly. But quick service, great customer service, great response time, those are all things that are high on the list of what people expect, and rightly so.
I would have to say there should be some type of response within 24 hours, whether it be directly from myself, if the question is directed or the thought is directly at me, or from someone on the county commission. But it also depends on the severity and the time. I'm sorry, I'm not going to reply or answer a call between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. So, but I definitely will be sure to get back to you and within the 24 hours if it's directly at me, or if there's someone else that could better answer the question. I would let you know that I've passed it on and that this person should be contacting you soon. So.
All right. And with that question, it wraps up this forum. Thank you for joining the Voter Education Coalition and WOW 6 for our general election forum. The general election will be held November the 8th. We'd like to thank the City of Lawrence for providing the venue as well as videotaping the services. A special thanks to all the candidates for joining us. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.